Most businesses do marketing as a pile of disconnected pieces. An ad here, a social post there, a website, a campaign that runs and ends. Each piece is decent on its own, and yet the whole thing somehow produces disappointing results. They decide that they need better pieces, a better ad, a better post. The real problem is that the pieces are disconnected. This is one piece of a bigger framework that I call the conversion ecosystem. And my goal is to use this system to help you become the most visible, the most valuable, and the most trusted business in your market. So if that interests you, keep on watching. Here's a single idea behind everything that I teach. Marketing succeeds when every part works together, or fails when every part works alone. That is ecosystem thinking. It's the difference between a pile of tactics that drain you and a connected system that compounds. If you run a business, especially as a founder or a professional service, you probably already have most of the pieces that you need. What you're missing is not more content or another campaign. In this video, I'm going to show you why disconnected marketing fails no matter how good the individual pieces are. I'll show you what it means to think in ecosystems instead of campaigns, and show you how connecting what you already have can transform your results without creating anything new. It is the connective tissue between what you already built. I spent 27 years in B2B marketing. The businesses that pull ahead are almost never the ones with the most pieces. They're the ones whose pieces actually talk to each other. Let's start with the puzzle that ecosystem thinking solves. Why do good marketing pieces so often fail to produce good results? You can have a genuinely strong ad, a well-written article, an attractive website, and still see little return. It's baffling if you believe the results come from the quality of your pieces. It stops being baffling once you understand that the results come from how the pieces connect. Here's what happens with a disconnected piece even when it's great. Someone sees your excellent ad, they feel a flicker of interest, and then what? If the ad doesn't connect to a next step, the interest evaporates. The person moves on, and the ad value dies in that moment. The piece worked, it created the interest, but because it's not connected to anything, interest leaked away from producing nothing lasting. A great piece that's a dead end is still a dead end. Multiply that across all your disconnected pieces. Your article creates interest that leaks away because it connects to nothing. Your social post earns attention, then fades because it leads nowhere. Your website gets visited by people who then vanish because nothing gets captured. Each piece does that small job and then loses the value it created because there's no system to catch and carry that value forward. You're generating interest and then throwing it away over and over again. This is the core failure of disconnected marketing. Each piece works alone, which means every piece is a dead end, which means the value each piece creates leaks away instead of builds up. It doesn't matter how good the individual pieces are, a collection of dead ends is still a collection of dead ends. The quality of the pieces can't make up for the fact that nothing connects because the disconnection is what destroys the value. So the reason good pieces still fail is not a quality issue, it's structural. The value the pieces create has nowhere to go, so it disappears. No amount of improving individual pieces fixes a structural problem, which is why businesses can keep making better and better pieces and keep getting disappointing results. They're solving the wrong problem. The problem was never the pieces, it was a disconnection between them. That exact disconnection is what the conversion ecosystem is built to solve. So what's the alternative? It's to design your marketing as an ecosystem where every part connects to and feeds each other. The word ecosystem is deliberate, borrowed from nature, where it means a set of living parts that depend on and strengthen each other. Remove one and the others suffer. Connect them well and the whole becomes far more than the sum of its parts. That's exactly what your marketing needs to be. In an ecosystem, no piece is a dead end. Every piece has a job and a destination. Your content does not just create interest and let it evaporate. It points that interest towards the next step, a way to capture the person into a relationship. The capture does not just sit there. It feeds the follow-up that builds trust over time. The follow-up doesn't just build goodwill, it leads towards a sale. Each part hands the value it creates to the next part, so the value flows forward and builds up instead of leaks away. Picture the difference concretely. In disconnected marketing, an excellent article creates interest that dies. In an ecosystem, that same article creates interest, then channels it to a lead magnet that captures the person, then the nurture sequence that builds trust, then an offer that converts. The article is the same, but now the value doesn't die. It flows through a connected system all the way to the result. The connection is what turns a dead end into the start of a journey. Wired together this way, content feeding capture, feeding nurture, feeding a sale. This is exactly what I call the content flywheel engine. This is why an ecosystem produces results that disconnected pieces can't, even with worse individual parts. The pieces of an ecosystem might be ordinary, but because they connect, the value they create is caught and multiplied instead of lost. A connected system of ordinary pieces beats a disconnected pile of excellent ones because a connection keeps and multiplies value while a disconnection destroys it. The magic is not in the parts, it's in the connection. So ecosystem thinking means designing your marketing so every part feeds the next with no dead ends, so the value created anywhere flows through the whole system towards the result. It's a shift from asking, is this a good piece, to asking, how does this piece connect to the others? That shift from pieces to connections is the heart of everything. Let me sharpen the contrast with a distinction that clears everything up. The difference between a campaign and an ecosystem. Most businesses think in campaigns. A campaign is a marketing effort with a beginning and an end. You launch it, it runs, it produces a spike in activity, and then it ends, leaving nothing behind. Next quarter, you launch another one, starting more or less from scratch. Campaign thinking is a natural home of disconnected marketing. An ecosystem is completely different. It doesn't start and end, it runs continuously and builds on itself. It's a standing system that keeps working, keeps capturing value, and keeps building up. Where a campaign leaves nothing behind when it ends, an ecosystem leaves an ever-growing asset that keeps producing. Where a campaign starts from scratch each time, an ecosystem builds on everything that came before it. Think about the path each one takes over time. Campaigns produce a series of spikes, followed by returns to zero. Effort, spike, nothing. Forever. You're always running just to get back where you already were. An ecosystem produces a rising line. Each effort adds to a growing system that keeps working between your efforts, so you're building rather than just maintaining. The campaign treadmill versus the ecosystem climb. This connects directly to why disconnected pieces fail. Campaigns are disconnected by nature, each one a separate self-contained burst that leaves nothing behind. Ecosystems are connected by nature, each part feeding a continuous system that builds up. So the choice between campaigns and ecosystems is really the choice between disconnection and connection. It's the choice between the value that leaks away and the value that compounds, between starting over forever and building something that lasts. And the trap of the campaign is this: it feels productive. Launching a campaign feels like doing marketing. There's activity, a spike, visible motion. But when it ends and leaves nothing, you have to do it all again, and you mistake recurring activity for progress. Ecosystem thinking can feel slower at first because you're building rather than spiking, but it's the only approach that actually builds up. Stop running campaigns that leave nothing behind. Start building ecosystems that compound. Here's a deeper insight that follows from everything so far, and it genuinely reframes how you should spend your effort. In an ecosystem, the connections are a real asset, often more valuable than the pieces themselves. We instinctively focus on the pieces, the content, the ads, and the pages because they're tangible and visible. But the connections between them, though invisible, are what actually create the compounding value. Think about why. A piece of content has a fixed value on its own, but the connection from that content to a capture mechanism, and from that capture mechanism to follow up, and from follow up to a sale is what turns the content's fleeting interest into a customer. The connections are what keep and multiply the value. So the same pieces with strong connections are worth far more than the pieces with no connections at all. The connections are doing the heavy lifting, even though we rarely think about them. This explains something you may have noticed. Two businesses with similar marketing pieces can get wildly different results. The difference is usually not the visible pieces, it's in the connections. One business has wired its pieces into a system where the value flows and builds up. The other has the same pieces sitting disconnected, each at a dead end. The same visible parts, completely different results because of all the invisible connections one has and the other lacks. It also tells you where to focus your effort, which is not what you would expect. Most businesses pour their energy into improving the pieces, making a better ad, and a slicker website because they could see the pieces. But often, the highest leverage move is not to improve a piece at all. It's to connect the pieces to the ones that you already have. Adding a connection, a capture step here, a follow-up there that links your existing pieces into a flowing system can transform your results without creating anything new. You already have the pieces, you're just missing the connections that would make them work together. So when you look at your marketing, don't just ask whether the pieces are good. Ask whether they're connected or not. Where does the interest your content creates goes? What captures it? What happens next? Trace the connections or notice their absence, because the connections, invisible as they are where the real value lives. Building them is often the single most valuable thing you could do, more valuable than any improvement of the pieces themselves. So how do you actually start thinking in ecosystems? In practice, start from wherever you are right now. You don't need to tear everything down and build a grand system overnight. You start by looking at what you already have through the lens of connection, and then you begin wiring the pieces together. Here is how. First, take stock of your existing pieces, and for each one, ask the key question. What does this connect to next? Where does the value it creates goes? For most businesses, the honest answer for most pieces is nowhere. The content connects to nothing, and the ad leads to a page that captures nobody. Each piece is a dead end. Simply doing this audit shows you where the value is leaking away, which is the first step to stopping the leak. You don't need every piece connected at once. Start with what I call the minimum viable ecosystem. One simple connection at each stage so the loop closes and begins to turn. Second, add the missing connections. Start with the biggest leak. Wherever a piece creates interest that currently dies, add a connection that carries that interest forward. If your content creates interest but captures no one, add a capture step. If you capture people but never follow up, then add a follow-up step. You're not creating new pieces, you're linking the pieces you already have so the value flows instead of leaks away. Each connection you add immediately makes your existing pieces more valuable. Third, think in terms of the whole journey, not isolated pieces. Instead of asking, is this a good post? Ask, how does this post move someone along their journey from stranger to customer? Each piece should have a place in that journey and a connection to what comes before and after. When you design with that whole journey in mind, you naturally build connections because you're always thinking about where each piece lands. The journey view is what turns piece thinking into ecosystem thinking. And fourth, shift your measure of success from activity to flow. Stop measuring whether you're producing pieces and start measuring where value is flowing through your system, from interest to capture, and capture to trust, and trust to the sale. A connected system with fewer pieces that actually flows beats a flood of disconnected pieces with a leak. When you judge your marketing by flow rather than activity, you'll naturally keep strengthening connections and stop being satisfied with busy disconnection. That shift in standard is the heart of thinking in ecosystems. I want to close the teaching by explaining why ecosystem thinking is the foundation beneath everything else. I consider it the most important mental shift in marketing. Every other idea, every tactic, every concept only works to its full potential inside an ecosystem. Alone, each is a piece that leaks. Connected, they become part of a compounding whole. This is why I call it the foundation, the base everything else on the system stands on. Think about how the other ideas depend on it. Building visibility creates attention, but without an ecosystem to capture and channel that attention, it leaks away. Building trust matters, but without connections that carry a trust prospect towards a sale, that trust produces nothing. Even a great offer fails if nothing connects the buyer to it. Every individual's strength only pays off when it's connected to the others, which is exactly what an ecosystem does. Ecosystem thinking is a frame that makes everything else work. This is also why isolated tactics often disappoint. A business hears that content matters, so they make content, but disconnected, it fails. They hear that emails matter, they send emails, but disconnected, it fails. They decide that the tactics don't work when really the tactics were fine. They were just not connected. Tactics fail alone and succeed in an ecosystem, which is why the businesses that win are the ones who connect their tactics into a system, not the ones with the best individual tactics. So, ecosystem thinking is not one more tactic added to your pile. It's that decides whether all your other tactics work at all. It's the difference between a business that does lots of marketing and gets little, and a business that does connected marketing and gets compounding returns. Master this one shift from pieces to connections, from campaigns to ecosystems, from activity to flow. Everything else you do becomes far more effective because it's finally working together instead of working alone. That's the whole idea, and it's worth repeating one final time because it governs everything. Marketing succeeds when every part works together and fails when every part works alone. Build the connections, think in ecosystems, and watch the pieces you already have start producing results they never could alone. Summed up simply, good marketing pieces still fail when they're disconnected because each becomes a dead end where the value is created but leaks away. The fix is ecosystem thinking, designing your marketing so every part feeds the next with no dead ends, so value flows through the whole system and builds up instead of disappears. This is the difference between campaigns which spike, then leave nothing, and ecosystems that run continuously and build. The connections between pieces, though invisible, are the real asset, often more valuable than the pieces themselves. This means connecting what you already have can transform your results without creating anything new. Start by auditing each piece for what it connects to next, adding the missing connections, thinking in whole journeys, and judging success by flow rather than activity. And this is the foundation beneath everything, because every other tactic only works to its potential when connected into a system. So remember the one line that governs it all. Marketing succeeds when every part works together and fails when every part works alone. Build the connections and let your marketing finally work as one. This idea is a piece of a larger system called a conversion ecosystem. And every video here connects to another part of it, with more depth waiting in the description. If this video was useful, then make sure you watch this next one. Remember, the most visible, the most valuable, the most trusted business in your market wins. The whole point of the conversion ecosystem is to help you build the system that makes you all three.